Hello, welcome to Thai TV. My name is Andreas Andersson. Today I will be tying one of my patterns called the Unholy Diver. It's an articulated streamer that I use for a variety of species actually. The one I will be tying today is a smaller version. I call it a junior. It will be around 10 centimeters or 4 inches. Pretty much a good all-round bait fish size. I use it mostly, in that size I use it mostly for sea-round brown trout in the Stockholm archipelago, and also when I want to downsize for my river flies. My river flies are usually quite a bit larger than the flies I will use for the archipelago trout. The fly itself is built up using craft fur, deer hair, a couple of feathers in the back as a tail, and some flash, and some Palmer chenille. It's very simple in terms of materials list. Not super complicated to tie. Might look a little bit funny, but it's a great swimmer. This is something I usually joke and say it's automatic swim included, and that's pretty much it. If you can strip a line, you can get this fly to move in a very, very fish attracting way. It's just made for a very much so-and-so fisherman. To help, well, first off, me catch bigger and more fish, and it really works. And I've sent this to all over the world and it just slays. It's a good one. What we will be using today in terms of hardware is a small hook for the back portion of the fly. The fly started out as a 2-hook platform using 2 larger hooks connected with wire and beads, like most articulated flies do, but I found out pretty quickly that I wanted a smaller hook further back in the fly. One of those short shank hooks that really grips and holds on to fish even when they're trashing around in the water. They won't get much leverage to twist the hook out of their mouth when you use a short shank kind of rounded bend style of hook. For the back part of the fly, I will be using this hook. It's a Ahrex hooks SA 280. Short shank, super strong, and it's just great at holding on to fish. And that's what I wanted for the back part of this fly. Get a hook far back in the fly, so when you got a fish that kind of nibbles in the back, or the back part of the fly at least, you'll really stick it. I'm thinking about you steelhead, that's nibbles in the back, and also our sea-round brown trouts are really notorious for maybe just pulling on the back part of flies. And that's why I wanted to move a hook way back there, compared to doing a 2-hook rig. I tried some different variations, hanging a hook off a wire, something I did when fishing for steelhead in Michigan with my friend Russ, but I found that this is my normal platform for it now, with the short shank hook in the back, a couple of shanks. For this one I will be using two 15mm Flyman Fishing Company fish spines, and then for the front part that will set up this head that will make it swim is a hook called TP 650. It's a bent streamer hook. The front part of the hook is slightly bent, and that is actually a hook custom made for making wedge heads, like on a Drunken Disorderly, my SIDS, and so on. You got that front part that sets an angle that when you strip this fly, water would hit this area and make the fly both dive a bit, but it also will go sideways. And if you could do a hard strip and then let it pause, it will just glide in a very, very cool way. And you almost got like a, I wouldn't say a Rapala effect, because it is just too soft a material to get that high frequency turning, but it does go side to side a bit, and it goes up and down. It's very three-dimensional, and it just catches a bunch of fish. So that hook sets that up. Big hook gap for its size, and that's to aid in sticking fish well, even though we're tying with a very firm and somewhat large deer hair head. So this front part is deer belly hair. I will show you later how it's done. That's shaped into a flat-ish wedge profile, very much like a Drunken Disorderly or similar. What I started doing now many years ago, actually, when I tried some Drunken Disorderlies that had more of a square cut head in the original version. That's a Tommy Lynch pattern. Great fly. But I found that those are somewhat prone to twisting or spinning in the water. But if I cut off the front part and taper the head, I can get that water push effect, but way less spin. So, and also you get a little bit more durability out of the fly this way, because it won't catch on to teeth as well. Not as much. So that's it. So let's get going. I've started by placing a SA280 in the vise. This is a size 10. And I got a very bright thread for you, so you can see it. It's a UTC 140. So I'm going to start it up at the hook eye and just wrap back about to the hook point. And for the tail part of this fly, I usually put like 2 feathers. It depends on how I want the profile and also the size of the fly, what feathers I will be using. But for this one, I'm actually going to use a whiting bugger pack feather. So pretty slim, but that's all right. That's going to be good for a 10 millimeter fly, 10 centimeter fly. That's it's not going to be a huge fly. I tie these in 4, 6, and 8, and sometimes even 10 inch versions that will be 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters, 20 centimeters, and all the way up to 25. And that we're talking about like musky or pike sized flies. So I'll be pulling 2 of these feathers from that patch. And from here I'll be placing them curving outwards like that, making sure I line them up and get the right length. Grabbing a hold kind of where I want them in length. That'll be good. Getting a grip with my left hand, cutting that off, and just getting rid of that junk. Place them on top here. 1 loose wrap, 2 loose wrap, and then come tight. And from here you can check, no, I have a little bit of a twist. If that happens, just do it again. 1, 2, a little bit better. Let's go with that. Just go ahead and lock that in. So a couple of slim feathers in the back will fluttering around and hopefully looking like a tail or something alive. Next up, some gray craft fur. I'll just pick out a small amount of craft fur from the hide. It's not a hide, it's a backing. Like that. And just press it together, grab the tips, and you can just use your fingers or a comb of some kind. Just clean out that under fur that's in craft fur. Then I'll just go ahead and reverse this. And the way I get this to, the way I place this on the hook is, I want it to be all around the hook. And the way I do it is this. I take it in my index and thumb on my left hand, if you're a righty, and just kind of slide it over and down. So you get the hook, right now I got the hook shank between my fingers, and let the craft slide around it. 2 loose wraps, making sure that the thread is all the way up to the hook eye. Come tight, and then wrap with as much pressure as you dare, forward a bit, and come back. Just switch scissors. And you see I hold on to that back part of the craft fur. If you do that and give it a twist, you can very easily just snip it all off, and it will be nice and clean, and you don't have to work hard for it. What we're using now is some lateral scale flash. This is just super cool. I'll take 3 or 4 strands of this, will be enough. This looks super cool in the water. It just adds a little bit of flash to the fly. And the fish seem to like it. So what I'm going to be doing now is just find the middle and grab onto that like this. And let the thread slide in between my thumb and index finger. Letting go with the index finger, and grab it with my thumb. Use my index finger to catch both sides of that flash, and that way you can just aim it where you want it. I want it on top here. You just go forward. Then I want to trim the flash to be just about the same length as the feathers. You see, this front part is now a little bit long for this size of fly. So what I'm going to be doing is just grabbing a very firm hold here with my fingers at the front part. Yeah, I'm basically gripping the hook eye, but also, of course, the craft fur. I'm just going to be picking it out with my hand like this. Just reducing the length of it. But it also just makes it, so I'm getting a little bit kind of a thicker, furry thing going here, and I'm going to reverse it. And you can do that either by just stroking it back with your hands like that, or using something like a tube. I actually have a straw on taped to my my scissor, because I do this so much. Do this reverse ties. So I'm just going to do that, making sure I've got all of it going backwards. 1, 2 wraps, like that. And then just come in and do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish. That's going to be enough, because we're going to secure it with some UV resin anyway. Just a little bit. Might have overdone it a little bit, but that's all right. No, it's good. Turn on the light, and that goes hard and protects the fly from unraveling. Whenever you have naked thread like that, you always want to protect it some way, with lacquer or UV resin or glue or something. I think so. Next up will be a shank. This is one of those 15mm shanks I was talking about earlier. To attach this to the hook in a very easy way, I hold the shank like this, put the tip of my scissor in like that, and just twist it a little bit. You see it opens up, and you can just place it like that. To give myself a little bit more room to tie, I will angle the vise slightly upwards before I put my shank into my vise here. I will also just get a little bit of water and make this a little bit wet. You see, it won't have those fuzzy fibers all over the place. And place a small magnet right at the back here, just to keep that hook in check. And from here, I'll be starting the thread right at the back here. You don't always have, that's something to keep in mind. You don't always have to do a thread base when you do streamers like this, because it's so often you're gonna be winding a material like a chenille or something like that forward. And just no point in making a thread base, because you'll be going forward with the thread anyway. So what I attached here was the Palmer chenille in medium, and you see just a couple of wraps to attach it. And from here, I'm going to be walking forward, and you got the thread base anyway. So making it from the start and going back would make no sense, because it's just extra work for nothing. And wrap this in spirals going forward. You don't have to be touching turns. I actually want some space between it in this part of the fly. And going forward, as I do the fly, it's going to be something like that. I'll be making these turns tighter and tighter. So I'm starting with a kind of a spiral like this, leaving some small gaps, because the job that this chenille has in this fly, besides just adding a little bit of cool flash, is that I want this chenille to kind of push the craft fur outwards, creating a profile. So when you start with less and then add more, you will have a taper going from the forward part of the fly. It's going to be thicker, and then it's going to slim down towards the back, towards those two rather slim feathers in the back here. And that adds to the swimming action of the fly. And next step is just very simply a little bit more craft fur. I'll cut a bit here and take out that junk. Just making sure that I got it in check. And just closing the hook eye there. I'm gonna start it at an angle like that and just bring it down around. 2 loose wraps, and you can just feel where the hook eye is with your thumb and forefinger here. And then come tight, wrap back very firmly, and then forward again. Keep a hold of that craft fur, give it a twist, and clean cut. I'm just going to give it a very quick little comb, and then we'll just reduce the length of this a little bit. So as you go forward, you're going to use more and more of the length of that craft fur. We'll just lay on top of the previous layer of craft fur, creating that veil around the fly. So this is not really a bulky fly at all, but it will look kind of big in the water anyway. And that's what I'm looking for, especially when we're fishing on the coast, where it might be windy. You got this synthetic fibers that adds a lot of, I guess, body or profile to the fly, but also a lot of action, since it's soft and flowy. But you don't have to worry about it being very heavy, because it's actually very light for its size. And that's because it's a synthetic that doesn't hold on to water the same way as a lot of natural materials will do, like for example marabou or rabbit and stuff like that. Feathers usually shed water pretty well, but anything with fur or stuff like that, it's going to be a little bit heavier. Now we've secured that with some UV resin. I'm just going to add the second shank. The point of these shanks is not really like it is in a game changer fly where they add a lot of action, because it's mostly about the head that causes the action in this fly. The shanks allow me to put that small hook that I was talking about in the beginning way further back in the fly, and that's basically it. And also, of course it's a platform for me to tie on. But you can definitely see some similarities to a game changer, but that was never the point. It started as a 2-hook fly, but it just found it such a benefit to have that short shank hook that for some of my other flies I really wanted it in an articulated fly, and it just came out like this. And if you're looking closely now, you see I'm doing the turns a lot tighter in this on this shank than I did on the previous one, and that is just to push the profile more and more the further forward I go in this fly to get that taper I was talking about. A little bit more craft fur. It's getting old. No. So I got a prepared clump of craft fur there. I'm just going to put it here for now and grab a little bit of a white craft fur as well. Doesn't have to be a lot. It's usually better when you're doing this fly to use less, actually. You will still get very good coverage or a good profile, even though you might be using less materials. And we're going to be tying the white in at the bottom. So 1, 2 wraps and then come tight and tie it in. Oh, twist, cut, done. Turn it back. And then we'll place that gray on top. 1, 2, hard wrap, and then lock it in. And walk forward again. And as I said, lift, twist, cut. A little bit more. And reverse side, just trying to make sure you get most of the white on the bottom and the gray on top. Just most bait fish will have a lighter color on the belly, so that's why I'm trying to kind of imitate here. And of course this and most flies, so it's very easy to vary the colors of this fly, just to imitate whatever you want to imitate. This, since it has this pretty wide head, if you do it like an olive brownish tone, it's a very good sculpin, even though it's not a weighted or fast sinking fly at all. I will use a sinking line to get this down a little bit, and just a reasonably long leader to let it do those swimmy things it does when you pull it, and make sure to give it a good pause as well, to let it swim out. And usually, most of the time when you're fishing a fly like this, after you give it a big pull and a long pause, that's usually when the strikes come. But I find that to be a very common thing with brown trout in general. So now switching to the TP 650. That's a 26-degree bent hook with that front part where we're going to be tying the deer here on the front part, and just a little bit more of the body on the back part of the hook, or the straight part. When I'm starting the thread just behind the bend, just 3 or 4 turns to start the thread. Some plastic coated wire. I'm going to place this on top, just a couple of wraps, and then do spiraling, oh, it's easy for you to say, wraps going backwards. And a couple more to make sure it doesn't twist. And what those spiraling wraps will do, I place them there with as much thread pressure as I dare to put on without breaking the thread. It will actually dig into that plastic coating and make sure the thread is really locked in there. I can easily lift my vise or break the hook this way if I were to pull it hard enough. Just cut it and go through the eye. And now what we're gonna try and do is make sure we got that loop vertical and straight. And when we have that, I want to place a few turns here at the back to make sure it sticks that way, and then do that spiraling wrap again going forward, and then a spiral backwards again. So we end up where we have that loop, a little bit more palm chenille. And again, this is going to be very, very close together, tight turns. I want this to really push that craft fur out. One turn, cut, fold it all back, and give a little bit of room here so you can tie in a second clump of white on the bottom. Lock it in, twist, cut, missed a bit. All right. Gray craft fur. Perfect. Right on top there. Loose wrap, then come tight. Oh. By doing those two loose wraps first, you're eliminating the risk of the thread torque when going around, twisting the materials on the hook. That's a good little trick there that people use for all kinds of tying dry flies and other stuff as well, but it really works on these soft, unruly materials that we're using here. Okay. Yeah. Last piece of polymer chenille, and now we're just gonna basically throw as much as we can on this middle part of the hook, just to make sure everything pushes out. When I go to tie a bigger version, for example a 6-inch, 15 centimeter, or a 20 centimeter version, I will first, for the 6-inch, add some chocolate filler flash for this part of the fly. And if I go up to an 8-inch or even a 10-inch, I'm gonna have to start putting bucktail, and then on those sizes I will be using the full length of the craft fur and also some bucktail. But just you have to build a taper, because otherwise it will be just a big snake. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Twist cut. Go forward. The last clump of gray craft fur for this fly. 1, 2, come tight. If it twists, just push it back and do it again. Make sure you don't allow it to twist. You want this to be on top and bottom, nice and clean. I got some so-and-so thread there. Lastly, a little bit of flash. I'm gonna just add 3 or 4 more. And so it's gonna be doubled, it's gonna be 6 or 8, but I think I got 3 here. And I'm gonna do it just the same way. Index, finger, thumb. Slide the thread in between, let go of the index finger, and collect with the index finger while pressing it against your thumb. And something like that. Just gonna leave that kind of almost reaching to the first part of the tail, but not all the way. I don't want to leave it too long because it can tangle that way. And now we're just going to do a whip finish, something like that. Good, done. And from here I'm just going to pull some more out. All right, that would be the body of the fly. Gonna look something like that. I got some non-lead kind of weight wire here, or just a piece of metal to hold on to this part. What I'm going to do now is put some deer hair on that hook that we're going to shape into that wedge shape I was talking about. I found it easier to angle the hook upwards, so I get that bent part a little bit more horizontal. First, I'm gonna just put some super glue on the bare hook shank there. Grab my other bobbin, and this is a GSP or Dyneema thread. That's very strong and quite wide. Put a thread base down and trim. Switching to the long scissors again, and this is deer belly hair I'm going to be using. This is just a gray that matches the body quite well. So I'm going to trim off a rather large clump, and what I do when I cut the hair off the hide on a deer patch like this is I take this long scissors, try and get it all the way down, and just pull with this hand and press down with the scissors at the same time as you're cutting. That way you get as close of a cut towards the hide as you possibly can, so you can get most of the length of these hairs off the deer hair patch. Just makes it a lot easier to work with if you've got some length. Even though this is not going to be a big fly, so I'm not going to be using all of the length of the deer hair because it's just not needed. But you want some kind of color, and I will do a color on the first part of the head in one clump. Some other people may do colors separately, but I usually don't. So I'm going to measure that. I want the tips to be right at the end of the front hook. I'm grabbing it with my left hand, and now we're going to do a tricky little technique that I love. Place it on top of the hook shank, 2 wraps. Then what I'm going to do is just grab a hold with these 2 fingers on here and press down with my index finger. Going to look a little bit something like this. And now it's better on the hook. And what I do now is just come tight, and now it's flared. I will not let go of the left hand just yet. I'm using 3 fingers and holding on very tightly. And with my right hand on the bobbin, I will walk forward through that deer hair, just a little bit at a time, kind of making a spiral through the deer hair. And that way I'm really locking it in to the hook. Use your fingers to just fold it back a little bit and work your thread through by just wiggling it through the deer hair work it back again with the left hand, and while keeping the thread tension very hard, or well, good thread pressure with the right hand, you just lock it in with a couple of wraps like that. These Dyneema or GSP threads are very strong, and they can take a lot of like pulling pressure, but they're also kind of slippery, so you want to make sure, and they do not they don't stretch, so you have to make sure that when you're done tying that spiraling part through the hair, lock it in with a couple of more wraps in front, just to keep that the pressure you put on it, you lock it by doing those 2 or 3 wraps, so you really get a strong and durable fly. So we got a little bit of space left here on the hook, and we're gonna fill it. So I'm gonna cut another clump of deer hair off the hide, grab onto the tips, and first just get rid of the bigger underfur, and then just a comb to get any stragglers out. It's a little bit smaller clump this time, but it's still quite a lot of hair. And I'm gonna cut the tips, oops, and just put a small drop of super glue here, right in there. And what I'm gonna be doing for this part is I'm gonna hold these hairs in an angle like that, and come in and do 1 loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, and while keeping that angle, you see it's angled like that now. If I were to pull straight down, this will just fall off the hook. I obviously want it to stick on the hook. So what I'm going to be doing is giving it a push with the forefinger and using these 2 other fingers to just hold on to it a little bit as I'm pushing. And after I've done that, I'm going to give it a good pull, but it's going to be a pull that goes, that happens, that's okay. So I'm going to do 2 loose wraps, hold on to this, make sure as I'm pushing it down with my index finger, it's going to spread around the hook. But what I'm going to be doing is pulling it that way. So I'm going to pull the clump of hair into the other clump behind it. I'll show you. 1 loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, like that. Give it a push, and at the same time you're going to be pulling this way. That way it won't fall off the hook. You get it all to flare out as it should, and all around the hook shank. You can just give it a little bit of a push here now to somehow, some way find the hook eye again. Making sure you got a lot of tension on that thread. Now I got the hook eye, I found it. Wiggle through, fold those hairs back, and making sure I got a lot of pressure, and now I'm just going to lock it in with a couple of firm wraps, and now it's locked in. Now it won't move. And from here it's going to be a whip finish. Just use your fingers to fold it back. I do hand whip finishes, but you can absolutely do this with a tool if you prefer. Or if you prefer to do half hitches, it's also something that definitely works. Give it a good pull to make sure you set the hook and set the knot properly. Always have to do that when working with those slippery GSP or Dyneema threads in deer hair, just to make sure you really set it. If you don't do that, the fly could be loose or even come apart, and we don't want that. I'm gonna try and grab that metal thingy. Right, so from here we're gonna do some trimming. I'm just gonna check the profile of the fly, and it's not great, so I'm just gonna pull out some more. since it's reverse tied, you can actually go in with your fingers and just make sure it's kind of the way you want it. I think it's going to be okay. All right, tying finished. Now it's time to trim this little thingy. So what I do when I'm going to trim most of the deer hair heads, I do with any kind of flat surface, is that I actually take the vise and move it this way. I place it like that, and I make sure I got the vise entirely flat, and also check for the hook eye, because that's going to be what I use as a support and a reference point for how I trim the hair. And I always start at the bottom, so I'm going to lay the double-edged razor blade right on top of the hook shank and do a slight upwards cut just to clean, just to make sure I see something. And then after that, it's going to be just slightly deeper cuts, but just a little bit at a time, just because if you cut too much or too aggressively from the start, you can't get it back. It's just do a little bit at a time. Okay, so just a touch more here. And the sides are usually best done with just one hand, just slipping it sideways like that. That's pretty good for a start. And again, I'm going to find the hook eye and use that as a reference point or starting point. And lay the flat part of my razor blade there. And I always start with kind of, when I do the top part, with a very steep cut upwards, very, very safety, not cut the thread kind of cut. And that just allows me to see the hook eye better, because that's always my reference point. Next cut's going to be a little bit deeper and a little bit further back. And I think we're good there. It's actually going to be close to finished in terms of top and bottom. After that, I'm going to set it on the side, making sure I got it pretty straight. And again, I'm going to use the side of the hook eye as a gauge, and I'm going to be cutting a slightly tapered shape to it. That's a little bit more narrow in the front and just getting a little bit broader as I go back. But it's still not going to be a huge head, but a flat head that will hold on or grab water and swim really nicely. I'm going to do just slightly more. And the other side. Starting at the hook eye, angle it upwards and just do that slight taper cut. So at this point I can check if the sides are even. I just want to cut a little bit more on this side. So I can go ahead and do that. And now it's a little bit too thick for my taste now, the head, so I'll just trim a little bit more off and go a little bit deeper into the color. That will change the look and the profile of the head a little bit more actually, but I always do just little by little. All right, so we're done trimming it, and what I want to do now is just add a couple of eyes and clean it up a little bit, and then we'll be good to go fishing. So some gel type super glue, two drops, one on each side, and let's get some eyes. And what I want to do here is, I made these drops on the sides, but I'm going to try and grab the eye just as finely as I can, and basically just drop it onto the super glue. just to make sure I don't glue myself to the fly. But this way, when it's just on top of the super glue like that, I can just use my scissors and carefully just place it wherever I want it, like so. Or you can use a dubbing needle if you want, but I always tie with my scissors in my hands, and this is basically my dubbing needle anyway. And by doing one eye first and making sure that it's exactly where you want it, you can just use that as a reference point for the next one. And since I'm gonna be just using the same technique where I just place it on the drop of super glue, I can just twist the vise like this, and this needs to be a little bit higher and a little bit further back, and then check it again, a little bit further back. I can still adjust since I haven't pressed down on it hard. When I've made sure it's straight, I'll just go ahead and press down on it, and it will lock in. That's perfect. From here, I'm just going to take my cauterizing tool and clean it up a little bit. This is just a little metal piece there at the front that gets really hot, so I can just basically just burn those straggler deer hairs here at the front right off. Make sure I get the hook eye clean. Something like that. You can fish it this way, no problem. What I usually do is just take a little bit of UV resin. Don't have to be much, just a drop. And just cover the bottom side and set it with the light. That should be enough. There's a little hair there. And the top side as well. So I'm pressing down into this a little bit. The middle part is so solid, it just won't go there, but on the sides, it just makes the sides a little bit harder, a little bit firmer. So if you can make a deer hair head pretty firm, you can actually get it to react better to the water. A soft head, a soft squishy head won't get hit as hard by a current or when you strip through water. I just find that I get a little bit more action out of a tighter or harder head, and you make it hard by adding first a lot of deer hair in a small place, and then just making it even a little bit harder by doing this top and bottom side, and also makes it a little bit more durable for fish to chew on. And that's something we want. We want them to chew on this fly. That's it. The Unholy Diver junior version for, well, I'm going to use it for sea run brown trouts, but I probably could use it in rivers, or probably I know because I've done it, but use it for river brown trout, steelhead. I've caught steelhead and salmon on this fly as well. And if you're in the US, bass, great for bass. You can just adjust the colors and also the size for whatever fish that you wanna go after. If you got predatory fish that eats bait fish or whatever, they're very likely to kill it. It's just really, really good. And if you want to win this particular fly, go ahead and write a comment on why you should win this fly. Be creative, and maybe you get to try this one out. Good luck. Thank you.